Okay, so one thing with the Mount Rainier, the pyramid example, what you do need to understand is you've got a grid. On a console based, it's fairly easy to place characters wherever you like. So one thing you need to remember is whenever you're trying to break a problem down, you need to break it down into smaller chunks and smaller modules. If you try to just look at the whole thing and try to grasp it, and some of you may find this fairly easy, it just comes naturally. On the flip side, there may be some of you that just find it just difficult to grasp the fact that how the heck do I break this down into smaller chunks, and it comes with practice too. So the first thing you need to do is the green section are the spaces. And the spaces are generally blank characters. It's nothing. It's just a string, nothing. So if we go through this, what we see is with the green section, there's two loops. There's two inner loops here, what we see. So the green part, or the green squares are the spaces. And what you see there is the loop is decrementing. So it's going down each time it cycles through. There's an outer loop that's going to keep an eye on the lines, or the rows you could say. So within that there's going to be two nested loops. One is going to take care of the spaces, the other is going to take care of the characters. Now if we look at the solution, now here's the solution. So we got a section for the rows. What this is specifying, it's saying that there's 5 rows and they're going to increment. So each time we print a row, it's going to move on to the next row. And this is kind of C, so I'd ignore that. It's got print line, but generally it's C out. So you could use that. So exclude print and just put C out. And I'll show you the C++ solution. But the part that you're really looking at is for spaces here. I've got spaces equal from 5, and depending on what the row counter is. So the row is based on the outer loop, and the space is going to decrement. So initially you may start with 5 spaces, and they're going to decrement to 4, 3, 2, 1, and then there's nothing. So this loop takes care of the spaces, allows the characters to be shifted to the right. Then the loop below that is for the columns. And I've just given it the name columns because it's going to place the characters there. And I've generally got it's going to place a character here. And that's going to increment. It's going to place that twice. Now if we look at the solution, and the solution has been provided online, so you can access the solution. So here it's same type of code, but we have C out. So the part that you need to keep track of is how the characters or the values of the characters are interrelated, or they're taken from the outer loop variables. So you need to try to keep track of that and try to figure that out. If you find that difficult, it's always a good idea to put that on a piece of paper. And you can always use the breakpoints. Remember, you can use the breakpoints, and then you can run this. So here we have the application first stops on the very first inner loop, and we know we can basically just run this. And we can hover over it and we can pin this. Remember, you can pin this and see what the value of the row is, what the value of space is, and you can also see what the value of the column is. And now if we continue running this, you will see the values of the spaces, the column, they are going to change. And each time it'll show you what is being displayed. So try to use the debug and being able to identify what the values of each variable are when you're trying to analyze and understand the code more deeply. So when we try to now flip it, it's going to be quite the opposite. So this time round we're going to have the columns and the rows. We still have 5 columns and 5 rows. So initially we're going to have all the characters that are going to display. So we're now going to have the inner loop, the very first loop, is going to increment, and the loop that holds the characters is going to decrement. Everything else generally remains the same. So based on the code I've provided, or the code you've worked on, how do you work out the second part of that exercise? So the solution to that sort of diamond shape. So we initially have the very first loop that takes care of the pyramid. We have the outer loop, which basically increments. So here we have the outer loop, which increments. Okay, then we have the spaces, which are going to decrement. So remember, spaces, it's going to be our spaces. And then we have the column, which is going to be 1 through whatever the value of the column is, which is going to allow us to form a pyramid. Now if we scroll further down, we can see that we're going to decrement the outer loop. It has to decrement because we're still using the value from row. The value of row initially is going to start with 5 because we're going to have 5 characters. That's why we need to have the row start with 5, and it's going to decrement. So first time round it's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, and it's going to give us that format. It's going to happen 5 times regardless because we have that start at 5. So it's still taking care of the rows. But why is it decrementing? Because we're saying if space is greater than or equal to row, and we've given the value of space to 5. So initially we're going to have space set to 5, which is going to display blank space. So it's going to initially, and that's going to decrement, which will give us spaces with that format, and the characters would give us that sort of bottom part of that diamond. And of course at the end of each second loop that we leave, you have to say C out end line. It has to go to the next line. Otherwise you'll just have a series of characters just stretching across. Because I'm going to run my code just to show that it does work, if it does work. Okay, and here it is. So once again, this is not the only solution. There's other forms or other solutions. But generally, this is how you would use nested loops. And you could see, you may be used to by defining the number of times a loop is going to cycle through. But in this particular case, we're using values from outer loops. So you can create more sort of complex solutions based on a simple problem.